Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Today, we are talking to a physicist, a therapist, and a nurse about COVID-19.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
The Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. And this is their new hoax. And I was shocked to hear it. 35,000 people on average die each year from the flu. And so far, we have lost nobody to coronavirus in the United States.
Take it easy, just relax. Relax. We're doing great. It all will pass.
The same vaccine could not work. You take a solid flu vaccine, you don't think that would have an impact or much of an impact on corona? No.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Originally, we were going to have a debate with a bunch of conspiracy theorists. All three conspiracy theorists backed out on us, and now we're stuck with just three really smart people and then me. We're joined with Gene. He is an RN actually treating COVID-19 victims. Dr. Ben at Ask Dr. Ben. What is it, group and page?
We have AskDrBen.org, and that will lead you to Facebook.com/AskDrBen. So I've got the group and the page.
It's a great resource to go to just for pretty much anything, but mostly science questions. Like if you wonder what happens if you go into a black hole. I think the guest on the last episode said that if you go into a black hole, you can see the past and the future and the present all at the same time. And I was a little skeptical on that. I was actually going to hit up AskDrBen.org for that one. Maybe you can fill us in here in a minute. But also we've got Michael Moore, my friend. You were on this episode where, oh man, afterwards I felt so at peace. You did us through a guided meditation. I think that it was named Mindfulness. Absolutely beautiful, man. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much.
Maybe you can give us a little advice on just how to get our head spaces right during this whole crazy pandemic. But I thank you all for coming on.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Awesome to be here, man.
Gene, what are you seeing out there, man? Is it fucking crazy or?
Basically, what's going on is people that are already at very high risk, they will die to a regular flu or a regular pneumonia, are the people that are going to die from COVID, okay? The problem with this whole thing is just social isolation really helps. Right now, what we're doing in the hospital is we have crews that go into the COVID unit for 2 to 3 months, then they get out, cycle out, then the next crew goes in, and then they cycle out. Where I work right now, we have like probably 300 available beds. I mean, empty beds. We are stockpiling ventilators and all that stuff. And what you have to understand about this disease, to not be scared of it, is it's just like getting the flu, and then you can't breathe anymore. Done. That's it. You know, you can't breathe. Yeah, no. And sadly, you either gonna fucking die from it or you're gonna be fine.
If I can, if I can jump in, I have COVID-19. I was diagnosed on April 3rd. I'm an occupational therapist. I do home care in Detroit. And if you're watching the news, Detroit, Wayne County, Michigan has been.
Yeah, I'm not watching the news.
Yeah. It's the state is being, we've got, I think, the third largest testable outbreak. And also, too, the United States is very poorly testing its population. And so the suspicion is that it's more widely in the population. It's hard right now to nail down a death rate with this flu. The normal death rate, I think, for the seasonal flu is like 0.1%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
This one is like a 0.3. It's like a 20% increase or something.
Well, I
don't have all the facts there. I'm just coming up to my head.
Right,
could be wrong,
right.
But it's
right.
higher.
It's much higher. It's actually, I think it's somewhere between 2 and 3% of the population appears to be dying from this. So if you extrapolate that out to a population of 300 million people, you're looking at 2 to 3 million people. Yeah. Well, no, I'm not a boomer. and I
Oh
have
no,
it.
I know you're not gonna die.
And well,
How long you had it for? Let me ask
I
you.
had a rough day.
How long you've had it? Up to
3
now?
weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
If you were going to die from COVID-19, you would have dead. You'd be dead already.
But I had a day when I could not breathe. Now
Oh
I'm,
no, but you're not on ECMO.
no, but I'm in exceptional physical shape. I was a childhood athlete. I had a lung capacity when I was in my 30s of 112% because I was a competitive swimmer. This disease knocked me out, and I'm in excellent shape.
The thing is, like, it's not about, unless you're morbidly obese, okay, we're gonna take those people out, or if you're very severely malnourished, we're gonna take those people out too, and we're gonna just look at the normal population, okay? The way that this works is just like a flu on steroids, meaning your physical shape does not matter whatsoever. Every year,
No, I agree with that point. Yes.
every year I have trainers, I have marathon runners, I got football players
Yes.
at my hospital that I'm treating because they got the flu and their body just couldn't do it. And that's a factor that's more important than actually being in physical shape. I feel like people get a little bit, it's easy to fall into one or other form of control that's driven by anxiety. If you, like I said, if you've been a smoker for, like I said, 10 years, stopping smoking now ain't going to do shit. If you've been in excellent shape for the last 10 years, that's not going to determine whether you're going to die or not from it. But again, that's my perspective.
I'm in agreement with that. I was trying to underscore the point that it's not just a disease where we can assume people within the boomer generation are going to be susceptible. We're having.
Oh no, yeah, I wasn't trying to make that impression. Every year, just like a seasonal pattern, there's millions of kind of variations of just the common flu.
Of course.
Some of those common flus attack healthy individuals and attack healthy lung cells.
Okay, Gene, I understand that, but the problem you have to underscore is the fact that we have flu vaccines. And we have no vaccine against this. This is a disease that our species has no immunity against. And so we have to talk about it in the sense that our death rate will probably be much, much higher. And everybody is a potential victim of it. And so that's why we have this social distancing. We're trying to flatten this curve. Now, because we don't have a vaccine, flattening the curve basically delays the onset of which the people that have it will actually hit the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. And so it will not, in the long run, actually probably change necessarily the death rate that much, but it will mitigate it to where the people who otherwise would have needed healthcare still get the healthcare they need because the system isn't
overloaded.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you've made beautiful point. Like
that's all. I just want to
beautiful point.
Thank you.
Oh no, that's like we have to stop. Like I'm the kind of person that not to get personal here, but I talk nonstop and you know. Yes.
I tend to be kind of lucky in that I tend to just go into just kind of a very matter of fact, compartmentalized, kind of a typical male way of dealing with it. And so when I was working in Detroit and this wave started to hit, I spoke very clearly to my patients and coworkers, and I said, this is going to be serious. We shouldn't talk about this to ourselves, or to our coworkers and to our patients like this is a normal flu. It's not. This is going to change things, and we will have to change the way we do things. And I just tried to level with people and say, let's just get on with this carefully and slowly. But this will change things. Definitely. It has to.
And again, it's just to very quickly. Everything you're saying is hitting home. That's really. It's a different perspective from mine, more so ever because I feel like overthinking about this is going to impair my judgment as a nurse, and I'm not going to let that happen.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah.
But the points that you're making are like, that's exactly how I feel about it, especially when what you were describing about the idea right now is to flatten the curve as much as you can and save as many beds as you can. And to be honest with you guys, I work in a transplant unit, heart and lung transplant. And so I've been very isolated from the virus because if our patients get it, they're going to die immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start cycling in so we can cycle some of the nurses from the COVID unit. But if you are a healthcare worker and you're working in the field and you're taking care of these kind of patients, you are the most secure person out there.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Secure?
Meaning, if I work in a regular unit,
I
have more chances of getting COVID that it hasn't been tested because we're fighting with the doctors ourselves about testing these patients, and these patients don't get tested until we fight with them. Like I had a coworker took care of this lady for 48 hours, fever, respiratory distress. Kept on asking the doctors, hey, we need to check this lady. Hey, we need to check this lady. Again, people are not making the right critical decisions. They're like, nah, it can't be that. That's impossible. 2 days later, patient was positive, right?
Yeah.
But if you work in a COVID unit, you're going in there, you take a chemical bath, you put unitard on, double fucking gloves, a N95, a surgical mask on top of that, a face shield, and goggles. You good. You know, you're there. And not only that, but we isolate the patients when we're working there. What we do is we go in the room maybe 5 times.
Yeah.
My shift. That's it. The rest of the time, I'm just looking.
When I got contracted this and I was diagnosed with it, I work for a major healthcare provider in Michigan, and so they were able to test me fairly quickly within a day, and I got my results within 2 days. But when I tracked back my connectivity of when I probably came into contact with this disease,
when do you think you got it?
I actually, this is the interesting story. I have a very good friend who is an engineer that works for a Chinese company, and his job is to travel overseas to manage the production of solar cell batteries. And he's a really good friend. Now, we're not the type of friends that get together and give each other hugs, but we do get together once a week. You know, he's an engineer. We have like a little music group that we do on the side that we do as a labor of love, and I think he's my point of contact because he's still struggling with it to this day. His wife has it, and they've had it for more than 4.5 weeks, and they've had a more severe case.
Dr. Ben, with this kind of pandemic that we're seeing in the U.S., it seems like we got on this pretty late in the game, and I wonder if it is kind of synonymous, not so much with the Spanish flu or swine flu or bird flu, H1N1, but if it might have something more in common with, say, Fukushima or Chernobyl or something like that, where they could have done something initially, but we just kept putting it off, and then finally all hell breaks loose.
I think denial is a common human condition, and if you've got a big government, I mean, I'm going to try to be fair about this, right? I mean, I hate Mango Mussolini as much as anybody, but you're running a government, you got 300 million people in it. It spans, 3,000 miles, and you never know what shoe's going to drop next. It could have been a nuclear disaster. Are we prepared for that? No, probably not. It could have been a pandemic of some virus. Were we prepared for that? No, probably not. It could have been some superstorm because we seem to be getting more and more of those, even though half of us don't believe in global warming. All this energy is coming from somewhere, right? Are we properly prepared for that? Probably, because we've had some precursors for that one, like Katrina. So it's always something, and you never quite know what you're supposed to be prepared for. And they probably didn't have the resources in place. If we are, going to be generous, they might have been scrambling to allocate the funds and get those resources in place. And they were just trying to keep everybody calm while they were doing it. So they were trying to act like it wasn't a big deal. Given our current administration, though, it was probably more just denial and, it's just another flu and it's going to be okay. And who gives a shit?
I'm a fan of the dumpster fire that is the Trump administration.
It's funny.
Because
you either cry or you laugh.
Yeah. But I cry and scream. I wake up.
If I might say so myself, I appreciate the guy's consistency. At least, what? This man has not changed. He probably came out of the womb, right?
That's like saying Caligula was fun at parties.
Well, I bet there was some romance. Actually,
I've got a political side to my background. Like I said, I found myself president of the Young International Socialists in college. Now, don't hold that against me now, but so I have a strong political side.
I got some questions about that actually. After you finish.
Sure. So anyway, I got involved in politics, my early 20s. As an aside, my mother ran for state senate on the feminist ticket in the 70s in Michigan. So I grew up in a political family. In saying that,
I cannot tell.
You can't. Okay. Are you being facetious, Jane?
Sarcastic. Just sarcastic. Hello. Sarcastic. Possible.
So I'm an avid. I do my best to kind of keep up to be a culturally literate citizen of the United States. I read the Michael Wolff book about Trump. I read the Woodward book, Fear, about Trump. I'm
Are
a
they
big.
both against or?
They both paint him as a vicious little toddler consistently.
I mean, we didn't need the book for that. Come on.
You know, the funny thing is, I never understood it. I sat down to watch The Apprentice the first time it ever came on the air.
I'm sorry about that.
Well, you got to keep an open mind, right? Maybe it's good. Yeah, I like business things. I was an engineer at the time.
Sure.
And I watched one episode of that show, and Annie will bear this out if we need her to. I watched one episode of that show, and he fired whoever he fired, and I looked at her and I said, I can tell you right now, that motherfucker wouldn't have to say that to me. I'd work for him for 2 minutes and go, we're done here. I'm not working for you.
Well, to me, the Trump is not the problem. Trump is a symptom. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's like I think that right now we are living in complete nihilistic times where people are like, let me just get mine while I can, fuck everybody else.
Well, this is why we've seen this administration have the largest turnover of personnel in American history. When the Trump administration came into won the 2016 election, and in the first few days, the Obama administration took them through the pandemic response booklet. I think it was 65 pages long. But all those people that were initially on that team have been fired or quit. And Trump has replaced them with more incompetent people. And it's clearly his responsibility. The buck stops with him. He is guilty and needs to be crucified with the statement where I think it was early February, where he stated at his rally that this was a Democratic hoax.
Yeah.
He's a deplorable human being. He shouldn't be allowed to be a manager of a Payless shoe store.
Absolutely.
Spoken like a true Yankee, my friend.
This show has potential in more ways than what we're just doing today, because you've got a Cuban, you've got a Yankee, and you've got a good old Southern boy who was.
You're right.
Gene, hearing Michael say that he was formerly in some kind of socialist political organization, and you coming out of Cuba, do you kind of feel like, the whole Democratic Socialists, the Justice Democrats, the whole Bernie Sanders thing, we were all kind of pushing from the left, at least the progressive side, that's a little more dangerous?
I don't believe so. I'm not against socialism. I think socialism is great. I don't believe that necessarily your political beliefs or affiliations determine how good of a leader you're going to be, right? So you can have somebody that has all your same values. That doesn't mean that they're going to be a good leader.
I think the biggest problem with leaders are the ones that crave power for the sake of power. It does, whether you're talking about Joseph Stalin or whether you're talking about FDR, who, it's almost sacrilege to say FDR was bad, but when he finally died, everybody decided to limit, number of terms that somebody could be president. People that crave control are not really the kind of people that you want to have it. You've really got to find somebody that's willing to do the job, but doesn't kind of really want it.
Yes.
Are you in really?
Yeah. It's just like Game of Thrones. So what you're just saying, what I'm trying to say is that I don't. First of all, I don't believe in the word trigger. If you say trigger, you're a faggot. I'm just gonna say it like that. You can erase it out. It's fine. But like, to me, you saying your trigger means that you're not man or woman enough to go and fucking confront the situation and fix it. No, instead you just lay on your back like a puppy, show your belly, and say you're triggered. So, not cool with it, right? So
I'm sorry. Can you what I mean by trigger? I'm.
Yes. Why? Because when Robert was asking me that, how do I feel knowing that you were participating in a socialist organization?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is the political views of any individual, right, don't determine his choice.
Well, also too, I think you'd have to ask me a series of follow-up questions. I was
No, but wait. So the whole point I'm trying to make is,
Yeah.
you can have just as bad. You can have a socialist that's a monster, and you can have a conservative that is a saint. I'm just saying that I don't judge. I believe in people are so complex that why am I going to reduce you
right.
to just socialism?
Right.
There's a universe out there of what you are, and if I'm really interested in knowing what you are, if I am interested in maybe decide that I don't like something about you,
Right.
or get triggered by something you're saying, that's a sign of weakness.
Yeah, monsters are everywhere, and
And also-
you know,
No matter who it
doesn't
is. I don't care what political affiliation. You know, I'm gonna be honest with you. Do you guys think that Fidel Castro was a communist?
No.
No, he was a dogmatic. What is the other fucking demagogue that would just do anything and affiliate himself to anything in order to remain in power and get the best power.
We have a poor education of world history and the history of the 20th century labor movement in this country. What I find fascinating about the terms socialist, communist, and capitalist, if you ask any individual what those terms mean, you'll get such a wide-ranging individual answer. It's like trying to ask somebody about their own personal God. You'll get just this, independent, this projected answer. And so I always try to speak from just a clear historical perspective. Stalin rose to power as a totalitarian authoritarianist and then tracked down and assassinated all the originators of the original Bolshevik communist movement. I mean, he had Trotsky assassinated in Mexico City in 1935.
He was trying to consolidate power. He was power mad.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Stalin could have been whatever. He would still be a fucking killer that would try to do whatever he needed to do.
Yes.
In my eyes, Stalin was kind of needed. I'm trying not to sound like, I don't know, like an asshole, but I'm saying that if you don't have Stalin, then we will be speaking German. That's it.
Well, I think anytime you can rightfully call somebody dictator, it doesn't matter what party they're supposedly affiliated with.
And also, tying this to Trump clearly has no ideology. Trump is so happy to be a pawn of Mitch McConnell and the Senate and to pass their crazy radical tax cuts for the extreme rich, and then Trump gets to just do whatever he wants to enrich himself. He's been in violation of the emoluments clause since day one.
But you know what? This motherfucker doesn't care, and he's having a good time.
No, he doesn't, and his supporters don't care because he fulfills their sort of rage quota.
Oh yeah, the perspective of the nurse when I'm taking care of a patient is always to the head of the bed. I'm never looking behind me. The TV's behind me, and I never fails. I know exactly what channel, down to ABC, NBC, Fox, and fucking CNN, just by listening to how they're approaching to something.
It seems like with the media right now that we're getting both versions of that, just talking heads of trying to sell their content. On one end, this thing is going to kill everybody, and then on the other end, it's complete denial of the threat. I can't believe how many right-wing news organizations were just mocking this completely. Yeah. This is why you can't vote for crazy, because we've got somebody in this office that we said, hey, it's really funny how we can just say anything and get away with it. He'll say lock her up, and then half the country's chanting lock her up. There were people protesting in Michigan just recently, chanting lock her up, lock her up. It's almost comical in the dumpster fire sense that you guys were talking about before.
But it's terrifying.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's like...
It would be funny if it wasn't our fucking country.
Yeah. Dr. Ben, have you heard anything about how the approaching summer might actually clear this up? Coronavirus is extremely sensitive to UV radiation, and that maybe once, everybody's able to go back to work and everything's fine again, it gets hot outside, it goes away, we're okay? Or does it just snap right back in the winter?
What I've heard about it, I've known probably since 20 years ago or longer, which is that was actually the premise of a book I read. I think it was The Hot Zone, if I remember right.
Yes.
But it's an old story, that viruses only live in very narrow temperature ranges. And when they get out of that temperature range, they don't last very long. They break apart or they freeze to death or however you want to look at it. So this idea that when the weather changes, this stuff doesn't spread like it used to has been around for a long time. And I think there's some validity to it. I mean, you talk about cold and flu season. It's always the winter. You know, when the summer comes, nobody's talking about a spread of the flu or anything like that. So there is some hope there and some validity there, even though a lot of people are saying, man, you can't count on that. I agree with that. You can't count on it. But I think there's some truth to it as well.
The other added component to that is also that in the winter, your lung capacity just naturally decreases no matter what, like within the spectrum of pulmonary, but it's just more liable for you to get a pneumonia, which is how most people die. They get the COVID, they lay because they can't move or whatever the fuck, and then they get a complication with pneumonia and then they die. Well,
your lung capacity, I would assume, your lung capacity decreases because the air density increases. So there's more oxygen per unit volume of air.
Yeah.
Mike, you see any light at the end of the tunnel, brother?
I'm hoping that as American citizens, we're much more empathetic and appreciative to what we now are defining as essential workers in our economy. Secondly, I hope we're more conscientious of a couple things: the intersection of our politics, our for-profit healthcare system, and our behavior as voters. And I'm hoping that we move forward with a greater sense of solidarity for our neighbors and people from different socioeconomic status and levels and classes, and a greater awareness of that. And I hope it's a wake-up call. I hope as Americans we develop the vocabulary and the lexicon to talk about this in a sensible, meaningful, productive, pragmatic way moving forward. This was a slap in the face. It was a kick in the American psyche. And it's important that we acknowledge it soberly and with reason and rationale.
Gene, thank you so much for the work you're doing. Michael, always a pleasure to talk to you, man. And Dr. Ben, everybody, you can find him at AskDrBen.org and Ask Dr. Ben on Facebook. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you to Dr. Ben, Michael, and Gene. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveBlairMusic.com. Thank you to our patrons. You can support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, 2 Christians and 2 atheists debate the question, what presents a better version of morality, Christianity or secularism? Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.